What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on the AJ Plays channel, and today we have the 2022 MLW Team Season in Review. Now, I did this last year for the first time, where I took each of the 8 teams. I looked at the teams, the individual players, as well as their overall performance during the season, looked at how they did in their statistical categories, as well as how each player, performed, and overall how the series progressed for them, and then I gave them an overall grade, saying, based on expectations, the outcomes, and what exactly happened to those teams over the course of the season. So this year we're doing it all again, and I feel like this one might be a little bit more controversial because it wasn't so easy to do grades, because we have teams that went 11-4 that lost in the league division series or league championship series, and then we have teams that went 5-10 in the regular season but won the World Series. So it's very confusing. You got to hear me out on some of these rankings, but we are going to get started immediately. Starting off in alphabetical order, we are going to get going with the Coastal Cobras. Let's get going. So beginning with the Snake Squad, we have the Coastal Cobras. Now, statistically, the team, their hitting was relatively average. They were like 5th to 6th in the league. They were pretty solid in a league that's become very hitting focused, as well as the pitching that was usually focused on mainly pitching, but now hitting has become a critical part of efficient 3-man lineup in MLW is critical nowadays. However, the pitching aspect, my apologies, first in strikeouts, second in walks and hits per inning, and then third in earned run average overall. The Coastal Cobras as a whole, they're pitching this season. Baranowski and Bien, we're going to get to them in a minute, but they did really well on the mound. They were one of the best tandems in the league, and it shows statistically. Now, as for the record, they really just started off a little bit slow. They lost the first 2 games to the Midwest Mallards, but then from there they went 10-3 to finish the rest of the season, including a 3-0 sweep of the Pacific Predators. And in the end, they got to the playoffs, but inevitably, as much as they did beat the Preds 2-1 in the ALCS, they did get swept in the World Series in a very heartbreaking fashion. Overall, the season, they blew our expectations, man. They got back to the World Series. They beat out teams like the Preds and the Wildcats, who were dominant throughout the season, and really put up a fight against them. Cobras took care of business, and you know what? They got back to the World Series, so they had a really solid season. Jumping immediately into the pros and stuff, Brendan Baranowski's dominance on the mound has to come to mind. He emerged from somebody who we thought would be the third option. We thought he would be a bust with the first overall pick. He turned into an absolutely lethal weapon. Baranowski was huge on the mound. His dominance proved huge as to why the Cobras ended up winning the American League title, their first in MLW history. Then right behind him, a part of the best tandem in MLW for pitching, in my opinion, you got Sawyer Bien and his developing arsenal. It was not just his insane drop ball, because there's a lack of other words to describe his stupid drop ball. His developing arsenal, huge. As the season progressed, his slider, his riser, all his pitches got better, along with that dominant drop ball. He became a really solid number 2 arm behind Brendan Baranowski. Now, as for Drew Davis, he backed off a little bit after that first little collapse against the Midwest Mallards. His managerial decisions proved to be critical. He made the right decisions at the right times as the season progressed. He did a really solid job as a manager. Batting lineup just had overall fantastic depth, so you're being emerged in the second half. Drew Davis was consistent all year. Sean Flynn and Andy Durand had their moments, but they were mainly OBP guys. They got on base when they had to get on base. And overall, the team, first American League title in history, and they made their first World Series appearance in multiple seasons. However, for the cons of the batting lineup, I say Drew Davis is inconsistent, Drew Davis is consistent, but there's guys like Sean Flynn and Andy Durand, the third guy in that lineup, even Sawyer Bien every once in a while, who would they'd go cold, man. There was a little bit of a lack of, 3 guys who would come to the field, play in every game, every at-bat would be a fight. It just looked like, especially in the World Series, guys like Sean Flynn, they were just having trouble against Jimmy Norp. Durand was just unavailable for some series, and the World Series, you could tell how much him missing could have played a factor. It would have been more energy for the Cobras, 100%. He could have possibly batted in for Sean Flynn. He did really well off of Norp in the Vermont series. And overall, I mean, him not being there is a huge loss for the Cobras. As for Drew Davis's pitching, that's regressed. He has not been able to pitch like he used to. And you know what? It's fine, because now with Baranowski and Bien both performing the way they did this year, there's no need for Drew Davis anymore on the mound. I think the injuries have caught up to him. He just can't pitch the way he used to anymore. And as for Sawyer Bien, is he a legitimate threat at the plate, or was that one series against the Preds where he had an absolute star day? Is that a one-off? Because he didn't really do that same kind of stuff again. Sure, he would get on base, sure, he'd get hits, but it's not like he had a 3 home run, 10 RBI day in the season again. It was just that one series where he appeared to be really dominant. Overall, the final grade for the Cobras, I gotta give them an A because you know what? They didn't have the highest of expectations of all teams. We thought they would have a very. Some people, including myself, thought they'd possibly have a down year. One of my hot takes was literally that they could actually go ahead and win the World Series. They got so darn close. They made it to SoFi. They really rallied as a team. Team chemistry has really improved. They have all the kinds of pieces now to go ahead and win in the future. They just came up short in the World Series, man. They didn't do that well. However, that doesn't eliminate the fact that the Coastal Cobras had a very good season based on their expectations. I got to give them an A, and this might actually be the highest grade that you guys see today. It's going to get a little controversial from here. So the next team we have here on the board is the Downtown Diamondbacks. Now these guys this season they've definitely been a little bit they've experienced a lot of lows, but also the highest of highs they've experienced. You know, you can see here at least we'll start with the statistics, you know, coming off a World Series, they were a little bit mediocre, honestly. Like, somehow the Gators or Magic, one of those two teams was better than the Diamondbacks in regards to average. You know, they were pretty okay in home runs and RBIs. Second in strikeouts. I mean, Jimmy Norp is doing what he can on the mound, but you know what? ERA and WHIP, they just were giving up a lot of runs in the early half of the season. You can see here that they went 2-7 in the early half. In fact, losing a series to a team that missed the playoffs in the Great Lakes Gators, losing that series 2-1. They did, however, pick it up later toward the end of the season. They went 3-3 in the second half. They went 5-10, third in the NL, but they came back. They made a ridiculous rally in the playoffs. Shima really stepped up with the bat. Jimmy Norp was just doing his Norp things, and you know what? Jonah Heath really came up clutch at certain points as well, and they were able to repeat, man. They won the World Series against the Cobras. Now you can already see the grade. This is a little bit controversial, but there's a lot of cons about the regular season and a lot of pros about the postseason for the D-backs. I mean, we can say the emergence of the lineup in the playoffs is probably one of the biggest pros. Shima was getting on base a lot, doing his thing. Even Heath was, and you know what? Jimmy Norp was just doing his Jimmy Norp things. Like everybody, they were clicking. They were playing like the 2021 Diamondbacks. And Shima progressively improved his hitting and his defense, even though I don't mention it here. Defense, like the guy was just playing like a Gold Glove candidate. He deserves to win one because he makes plays look so routine even though they can be very difficult at times. As well, he was just seeing the ball really well. He started to hit a lot more and he was getting on base a lot as well. Heath also improved in the second half. You know, he had a few home runs here and there. I think he had 3 total in the second half, and a lot of those were off of the Eagles tandem on the mound, which are pretty damn solid. And Jimmy Norp, playoff Jimmy Norp, bro, like it's Jimmy Norp. Even though he had an injury this season, the dude still what he could. He kept up his dominance on the mound and at the plate. He did what he could, man. He tried to drag his team into the playoffs, and you know what? They got there. They won the World Series, but like, I mean, it does not really like take away from the cons here because like you got to look at it a little bit here. Heath had a very early season regression on both sides of the ball. Last year he was a top 10 player in MLW. You can ask a lot of people, they'd say he'd be in their top 10. This season, early season, he was missing, man. With him gone, like he was physically there, but he couldn't contribute. He wasn't contributing. With him gone, there was a big issue in that lineup. And then from there was also a lack of a consistent lineup early on. Bennett, Flood, Shima, and Heath, like no one really behind Norp could figure it out, man. It took them until the second half to, you know, start putting the pieces together. The first half was terrible. The sweep against the Mallards is like a little bit excusable because it's Jordan Robles, but losing to the Gators that series, a one-man franchise, that is terrible. That was bad. Flood and Bennett as rookies, you know, we don't expect the world to come out of rookies, but they did struggle a little bit. They were given their chances on the mound. Bennett did look really solid on the mound. I hope Trey Flood can improve as well. And they both, I believe they both had home runs in that first series against the Wildcats, though. So you know what? They didn't keep that up throughout the season. They did struggle in their rookie year. Hopefully they can do better. But overall, the lack of a second pitcher, which is crucial in MLW nowadays, it was not there. Flood, Bennett, and Heath need to figure it out for next season. Jimmy Norp can't be pitching every single game. Jimmy Norp can't be pitching every single game all the time because eventually, you know, his arm might die out, man. You don't know what's gonna happen. I commend him for going all those innings. The guy went 14 innings in the NLCS alone. Forget the World Series. Jimmy Norp did exactly what he could on the mound, but like especially in the regular season when the games matter, Heath, Flood, Bennett, or maybe even their draft pick next year, they gotta come back and take that position on the mound as a second pitcher and really emerge. I'm gonna have to give them a B plus, man. I'm giving them a lower grade than the World Series runner-ups that they swept. Also, because as much as they won the World Series, guys, you need to understand that during the regular season, they did not live up to the potential that we expected from a former World Series contending team. They unfortunately they regressed in the regular season. The playoffs they really impressed. They did a lot. Like they shocked all of us because I didn't think that they would actually have the potential to go all the way and finish the job against the hell. I didn't think they'd beat the Mallards, honestly. However, a B plus, I feel like it seems right because they did have playoff success, but during the regular season they stumbled a lot. They lost to a series to the Gators. They got swept by the Mallards. They barely made the playoffs. Honestly, it was very close. The Gators almost overtook them. They almost missed the playoffs. I'm gonna have to give them a B plus. D-backs, hopefully you guys can come back next year. But this year you won the World Series, but the regular season was very, very forgettable. Moving on to the next team here in the alphabet, we got the Eastern Eagles. You know what? These guys, they had definitely had a little bit of a, you know what? They definitely improved as a team, especially when you're looking at development from 2021 to 2022. Getting rid of Clayton Price and Neil Smith, it sucks for like longtime MLW fans, but it's huge for this team. They really took the step in the right direction, and you know what? They're giving their young talent the time to shine. Eagles, this year, their average was actually pretty, it was like mediocre to above average, second in batting average and third in RBI. Dallas Allen fueled a lot of that, and Zach Whalen had an MVP, sorry, all-star kind of season. So you know what? They both really propelled that offense to be better than it always has been. Meanwhile, first in ERA, the tandem that they have is just insane. Third in walks and hits per inning, and then fifth overall in strikeouts. Overall, they had the best first half they possibly could have had. Like 8-1. I mean, losing a game against the Magic, that's a bit embarrassing, but 8-1, they swept Robles. Like, that was huge. But then they stumbled going into the playoffs. They stumbled down to 10-5, second in the NL. And then they blew it, man. They lost in the NLDS versus the Diamondbacks. Like, all of a sudden, the wheels just fell off as the season kept going. Hitters started figuring out Dallas on the mound, and I guess that's exactly what contributed to the downfall of the Eastern Eagles at the end. I mean, we're going to look at the pros and cons of this team, and one of the pros immediately that comes to mind is that they have newfound batting depth. Like, out of nowhere, these guys have come in, and they have just discovered this new hitting talent. Like, with guys like Urgaitis, Walker, and Allen added to the team, and Whalen having an all-star season, it really helps these guys come back, and now they're all of a sudden a really good hitting team. Dallas Allen's emergence on the mound, though, contributes mightily to their success this season. 8-1 in the first half because he did not allow a singular earned run. The banana ball was working all the time. Like, he was doing fantastic in that first half, and it was definitely recognized quite a bit. He ended up being the starter in the All-Star game, if I remember correctly. Now, Zach Whalen, he had an all-star season. You know what? He had a lot of home runs. He was really driving that offense for the Eagles in the first half of the season. They all did really well in that first half. Urgaitis had a very underrated rookie campaign, in my opinion. You know what? He got hits. He can hit for power. The guy actually did really solid this season, and he actually pitched the game against the Preds, and he showed that, you know what, he can be a serviceable arm in the league if necessary. A team like the Diamondbacks could possibly use him, honestly. And honestly, one of the best pitching tandems in the league. And then Urgaitis on top of that, bro. That's three solid pitchers that this team has. Daniel Schultz is already dirty enough. But then Dallas Allen, if he continues to develop, remember, Dallas is only 16, 17 years old. He's going to keep growing. He's going to keep developing. He's going to be huge. It's going to be they have a very bright future to say the least. Now, as for cons, Daniel Schultz, I feel like his hitting was relatively inconsistent this season. Like, he did solid in some on some days, but other games, like other days entirely, he would just struggle. And you know what? He was just like he was either on or not really on. Like, he was not the driving part of the offense like that we remember Daniel Schultz to be for the Eagles. Now, as for Dallas Allen, you know what? I feel like in situations against the D-backs in the NLDS, we saw how much he struggled, especially when the D-backs started coming back. All of a sudden, he couldn't really get out of it. He had to get help from his fielders, or you know what, Daniel Schultz had to come in. He couldn't really finish the job. He really just fell to the pressure. Obviously, he's young. Obviously, he hasn't been in that kind of situation before. He's going to improve. He's going to learn for next time. But this year, like Allen, you know what? The young pressure got to him. He couldn't really finish the job. Daniel Schultz, however, I have an issue with you playing a five-man lineup when it matters most. I'm sorry, Blade Walker, he could be solid at times, but you don't play him in a situation where you need to just get wins. Same goes for Urgaitis. As much as he's solid, maybe every other game you could throw Urgaitis in, but you need to play your best hitters, and those are Dallas Allen, Zach Whalen, and Daniel Schultz. Those are your best three. You got to play those guys, and that is pretty much why they struggled, man. Because Walker, especially, your guidance a little bit. They weren't really automatic outs, but you know what? They were easy for Jimmy Norp to go against. It wasn't really that difficult of a fight that they put up for Jimmy Norp to get them out, and the Eagles ended up falling in the NLDS because of that. I'm gonna give them a B grade on the season because you know what? They continued to develop. The team did solid in the first half, but they stumbled toward the end of their season, and then they still missed. They still missed out on the NLCS. They still lost in the NLDS. The Eagles, this was the best season we've seen from you guys in years. Is this success going to continue into next year? Push can you guys push on to the NLCS? Can you guys keep going forward? Who knows? Obviously, you guys are young. You have a lot of talent. I'm giving you guys a B because you know what? Had a solid first half. You're the opposite of the D-backs. Had a solid first half, started to slip, and then you crashed and burned. So we move on to one of our teams who ended up taking to finish the season, even though they went ahead and traded away two draft picks for Jason Chadwick. We move on to the Great Lakes Gators. You can see here pretty much the bottom in every category other than one. Actually, no. We're pretty much at the bottom. And I mean, the reason they're not at 8th is because the Metro Magic exist. However, for batting average, I don't know how they're 5th in the league. I'm genuinely surprised by that. Tied 6th in strikeouts. The only reason why that's the case is because the last 3 teams are all tied for 6th in strikeouts. So technically, they're all last. And then, I mean, the offense was better than the Magic. So, like, that we can make clear. That I understand. 7th in ERA, understandable because Magic were crap. And then as for the walks and hits per innings, I don't know. Whatever. Season started out pretty poorly, okay, they almost came back and beat the Preds. Actually, no, the Preds almost came back to sweep them. That's what happened. And then from there they get swept by the Eagles, barely take some from the D-backs, and they get swept twice by the Mallards in Oklahoma and then the Wildcats after they acquire Jason Chadwick. End up going 3-12, 4th in the NL, and they find a way to miss the playoffs after sacrificing 2 years worth of picks for Jason Chadwick. So we're going to immediately just move on here to the pros and cons. Pros are pretty simple. You got Chris Cheatham's pitching and Chris Cheatham's hitting. Honestly, he was dragging the team on his back. He did everything he could on his own for the team's success. Chris Cheatham's pitching and hitting was the only thing that gave the Gators 3 wins in the first half and 3 wins all season. You can guess that a pro is acquiring Jason Chadwick. I don't really understand. I mean, you know what? It's huge for the team's overall, confidence and morale, as well as, altogether, it's great for the chemistry as well. But other than maybe acquiring Jason Chadwick, he didn't even do that bad in the series that they played against the Cats. They still got swept though. There's not that many pros. However, looking at the cons, I mean, Jorgensen the regression continues. I think he had one solid game at the end of the season against the Wildcats, which he still blew in extra innings. And then from there, his hitting's disappeared. Brendan Zerlag has been regressing as a hitter. Reese Harris has not lived up to the hype whatsoever. I'm sorry, Reese. I know you follow me on Instagram, bud. But, dude, come on. You did not do that well this season. I'm talking like I'd do any better. Trust me, I'd strike out every at-bat as well. Doesn't mean, I should be drafted in the league. Anyways, and then the cherry on top is they sacrificed 2 years worth of picks for a playoff push, and they still end up missing the playoffs. That's a little bit questionable. It's a move that, maybe I feel like the Magic win that trade because who knows what those 2 picks can be. Right now, second projected pick is gonna be Lorenzo. I don't know his last name. I don't know how to pronounce it, guys. I'm sorry. Zoe from We Got Ice, because you know what, MLW and We Got Ice just collaborated the other day. So I mean, I think that overall that wasn't really the best trade for the Gators. They could have really just kept the picks and focused on the future, even if they still missed the playoffs anyway. So what would the difference have been? You know what? Jorgensen, Zerlag, they regress everywhere. Chris Cheatham was the only saving grace for this team. The reason why I'm giving them a C- is because even though they lost some games, it's not like they got completely blown out. They were still in very close games. They still did what they could. But even then, it's like, you know what? They still missed the playoffs and just I feel like they could have whiffed on that trade where they sacrificed 2 draft picks for Jason Chadwick and they still find a way to miss the playoffs. I don't know what to say about it. I'm going to give them a C-, pretty much because they only missed the playoffs by 2 games. It wasn't even that bad. I mean, somehow the D-backs somehow went on to win the World Series with 5 regular season wins. I'm still shocked. It's December 21st and I'm still shocked. But that's not the point that I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to say is that, you know what, they kept it close. They did lose a lot of games. They kept it close, and Chris Cheatham drags them to a C-, like he's been dragging them to every single win that they have this season. See, I'd play the derp derp derpity derp music, but last time I used that, I actually got a copyright strike, so I'm not going to use that. But the stats explain itself. Guys, we got the Metro Magic. They sucked. So they didn't even win a singular series. The closest they got was they almost beat the Eagles in the first regular season series. Like, it was an extra innings tied at 0-0 in Game 3. They almost got it, but Blade Walker walked them off. Then from there, you know what? They barely snagged one from the Coastal Cobras. Thank you, Jay Chatty. You're not here anymore. Preds blew it. Cats blew it. Traded Chadwick. And then against the Mallards, they blew it. So 2-13, 4th in AL, they missed the playoffs. Every statistical category, they pretty much came in last. I don't know how they beat the Gators out for walks and hits per innings pitched. Everything else, like there was zero offense. Pitching tried to hang on to, like, they tried their damn hardest to hang on and just, like, give this team a chance for so long, but they still couldn't get it done. And then tied 6 for Ks. We already said that, you know what? They were at the bottom of the league for strikeouts. Now, you know what's bad when I say the cons for this team are everything this season, but you know what, let's just look to the pros first. Somehow Jordan Curdy was the team's best bat this season. You know what, he's supposed to be like a get-on-base kind of guy, not the team's best hitter. That's not a good thing. Trevor Bottom's early season pitching dominance, you know what, he was solid against the Cobras. He really put up a fight in that series. He did pretty well against the Eagles as well, but after that, you know what, he just became hittable. Trevor Bottom has become a very hittable pitcher in this league, man. I don't know what happened to him. Somehow we beat the Eastern Eagles in a wiffle ball game. I guess you can consider that a positive. I'm not too sure. And in the Jason Chadwick trade, you know, we lost Jason Chadwick, but we still brought in 2 draft picks for future drafts. 2024, we actually are going to have 2 draft selections there. And you know what? If we can draft either Jack Doyle or Zodemalia, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his last name, guys. I am so sorry, but if that is the name, hey, I got it bang on, but whatever. Anyways, so yeah, we bring in 2 top picks, and I hope we draft one of the guys from We Got Ice. That's all I'm going to say. Cons, everything. Power hitting, irrelevant. We literally had 2 home runs all season long. Jackson and Bottom just could not hit. I think they had averages under the 100 point, if not barely over. Like, it was terrible. Chadwick ended up getting traded, but you know what? We had to do that trade because we had to get some capital back. And I think he probably had the best two-way value. Bonham really was more of a pitcher at this point. We had a lack of second pitching. Like, I don't know what happened. Like, Chadwick letting up like 6-7 runs a game. Not too good. And then, you know what, Jack Agner just missing. Like, he was missing the entire season pretty much. And you know what? That really hurt the team's overall, like, morale. And, you know, there was no energy there. I feel like a lot of energy was missing in series that we played against the Eagles and the Predators as well as the Mallards. There was no energy on the Magic team. Jack Agner, that spark plug, was missing for the team. Overall, a D grade considering we expected these guys to have a World Series run. Well, some of us actually did. A lot of you guys were right that the Magic would fall off, but a D grade is what I'm going to give them because, like, there's a few pros here, but the rest are all cons, and we expected them to go far. Gonna give them a D. That's the lowest grade you guys are going to see today. So we're finally moving back over to teams who actually have competent wiffle ball talent. Here we are. We got the Midwest Mallards. Honestly, according to the stats, they were pretty much average in everything. You know, 4th in average, 3rd in homers, 4th in RBI. You know, pretty average, like above average numbers, I'd say, for the pitching, for the hitting, my bad. And then as for pitching, I mean, okay, Tommy Coughlin as a second pitcher struggled. Caden Irwin and Brendan Davenport, that one game, like, that was bad. There was one game against the Eagles that they were terrible, but otherwise, I mean, the second pitching wasn't even that bad to finish the season. Irwin and Davenport actually both improved, in my opinion. They both threw pretty solid games. Granted, it was against the Gators and the Magic, but statistically, you know what? Robles pretty much carried them to 4th in ERA, 4th in WHIP, and they were the 3rd other team to be tied for 6th in strikeouts with the Gators and the Magic. But anyways, like, looking at the team overall, they had a really dominant season other than that Eagles series, which was atrocious all around for them. They won every game. They lost one game against the Cobras thanks to Sean Flynn's walk-off home run, but the rest they dominated the entire way through other than that Eagles series. 11-4, you know, 1st in the NL. That's literally the reverse of what they did last season. They were 4-11 last. This year they're 11-4 in first. Complete reverse. Lost in the NLCS against the Diamondbacks, though. You know what? It's a huge improvement considering the state of the Mallards last year, and it's all thanks to one man, wiffle superhuman, like God, Jordan Robles. And let's be 100% real here. pros for this team. Jordan Robles, his entire being as a wiffle ball player, like, dude, he is superhuman. Hitting, he's an all-star. Pitching, he's an all-star. Like, Cy Young candidate, Silver Slugger candidate. He's literally an MVP candidate in his rookie season. Fantastic stuff from Jordan. He's 100% winning the Rookie of the Year. No way they give it to, like, a Sawyer Bean, who's the only other candidate, in my opinion. Now, as for pros, other than Jordan Robles, as the season progressed, Caden Irwin and Brendan Davenport did improve, showing potential as second arms against, it was the Gators and the Magic. However, you know what? They still did show potential, considering those guys have had success in MLW before. And you know what? It still shows that they can actually still be really serviceable arms on other teams and for these guys going forward, especially Davenport. I'm like really impressed with him. Tommy Coughlin's hitting turnaround, like I guess from last year, the Diamondback series, like the 2021 final series, he had something to prove. He had something to build on. And then now this season, he really improved as a hitter. He did fantastic. He was hitting righty for the full season. He did really well, and you know what? He was a great 1-2 punch with him and Robles at the plate. Irwin was started filling in the role of the third guy in the lineup, and he actually had a home run and a few hits in that Diamondback series in the playoffs. And overall, Robles' rookie year and MVP campaign, like, the dude just, again, he's superhuman. He's God. He's wiffle God, okay? As for cons, Caden Irwin's, like, him being missing in the first few series led to Davenport and Wilson being forced to have at-bats, and they both did not do anything. Ben Wilson for Trey Flood is one of the weirdest trades in history, not to mention that the Mallards now moved down in the draft because the D-backs ended up winning the World Series. The trade Jimmy Nor made actually looks really solid now, but Wilson and Davenport they weren't too dominant with the bat. Coughlin had his pitching issues. He was not, he just did not look the same, like the same Tommy. I think his pitching days are done in MLW. I think some of his injury issues, like Drew Davis, are going to force him off the bump, and other guys are going to get opportunities for the Mallards going forward. And beyond Robles and Coughlin, there was a lack of depth, man. There's depth there, but there's a legitimate third threat that every lineup needs, and they did not have that. Caden Irwin, he's improving, but he's not there yet. They need a third hitter, and they're going to get that in the draft. They have the first overall pick thanks to the Metro Magic. The Mallards are going to be able to go ahead and pick up a third bat and a second pitcher. They're going to get that guy. They're going to get a Robles kind of guy, someone who's going to be better than Coughlin. They're going to have a really good team heading into next season. This is something that they will be able to fix, but as for this season alone, they had a lack of depth, and you know what? Overall, I'm giving them a final grade of a B+, similar to what the Diamondbacks got. I gave them a B+ as well. I'm giving the Mallards a B+ based on expectations. You know what? Jordan Robles, like, he was just a little bit of a question mark because we didn't know how many series he'd be available to come to. He came to all of them. And just like that, the Mallards, they literally reversed all their records from last year, and they did much better, much better this season. And they really surpassed my expectations. And overall, I think a lot of the community was really impressed with how the Mallards were able to really compete with the D-backs. They got the 1 seed. They really gave the D-backs a run for their money, even though Jimmy North threw a perfect game in Game 3 of the NLCS. I feel like Tommy Coughlin and the Midwest Mallards had a really good bounce-back year. Gonna give them a B+ for that. Okay, now we move on to the Pacific Predators. This team, you know what? Yeah, they definitely did have a really good season compared to last year. You know what? They made the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But looking at statistics, I mean, they're hitting overall. I mean, driven by Ryan Kratch and then a solid support behind him with Brennan Russell and Alec Warda. You know what? They were top 3 in every category for hitting. Tied first for home runs and second in RBI. They did really solid there. And Ryan Kratch did what he could, man. They were third in strikeouts on the pitching end. Stephen McGlade had a bit of a weaker season. He ended up driving the Predators' averages down. So, 5th in earned run average and 6th in walks and hits per innings pitched. So now moving on to, we look at it, similar to the Mallards, they had a very consistent season, other than the COBRAS, where it's not like they just got blown out by the COBRAS, unlike the Mallards. They actually kept it close a lot. It was really close. They just lost 3-0 in that series, however. It does not exactly say that, they're a bad team, because they came back, they bounced back, and they ended up beating the Eagles, and they went ahead and they put up a really good fight in the ALCS against the COBRAS, finished with a 9-6 record, third in the AL, and they barely came up short from going ahead and winning the World Series. winning the ALCS and moving on to the World Series. In my opinion, I think the Preds, if they advanced, they could have put up a better fight there than the Cobras did. Sadly, I love the Cobras. I wanted to see them win so bad, but I think the Preds, considering what we saw from the Cobras, I think the Preds, if they had advanced, they could have done a better job than what the Cobras had put forward. And guys, I'm gonna be dead honest with you. There wasn't really that much of a point in the season where there was really any like a stand like flaws for the Preds. There was only a few. There's not really that many. Overall, they had a lot more pros, man. Ryan Cratch's MVP campaign overall, his hitting, his pitching. He really improved as a hitter. He won the home run derby this season. Pitching, he did fantastic. I personally think he's the MVP. He's got to be the MVP. I'm making it clear now. Ryan Cratch is my 2022 MLW MVP. I'm making that clear. Now, they had a strong power hitting team with the big three of Russell, oh my brain, guys. I really do apologize. Warda, Russell, and Cratch all together. So, I mean, those three, they're great power hitters. If they make contact, it's a hard line drive or it's over the fence. And we saw 4 back-to-back home runs in that ALDS. Like, we know that they can hit for power. Mac Hawley, honestly, was an underrated OBP guy. Obviously, not the best player in the draft, but considering that he got on base quite a bit, he drove in runs, actually, every now and then. Mac Hawley did his job, man. Like, the Preds, they have a really good team. They don't need to add that many more pieces, but Mac Hawley was a very underrated OBP guy for that group. Rudy Ramirez is Mr. Energy. I'm always going to give them credit for having that guy on that team because, you know what, Rudy is just one of my favorite guys in the league. I think I'm going to go ahead and buy a Rudy Ramirez Moxie jersey right now. Drop $75 on Rudy Ramirez. And they officially made Ryan Crash a part of the managerial team, man. He's now a co-manager with Alec Warda. And I honestly think it's very well deserved considering how long he's been in this league. It's now next year will be his 9th season in MLW, and he has been a part of 2 World Series winning teams. He has won the MVP, Cy Young. He's done everything. Cratch has really been that kind of guy. You know what? He deserves to get officially a managerial title. Now, as for cons, Stephen McGlade, love the guy. However, relatively inconsistent play on the mound. I feel like he just was not that guy this season. He did okay. However, it was not like how we expected last year. How we expected maybe McGlade to take over from Cratch, and like Cratch would not be able to like get that many stars because McGlade would do even better. No. McGlade, I wouldn't say he regressed. He just stayed at the level of play he was at last year. Wasn't really noticeable. Ryan Cratch just surged, and he claimed that #1 pitching spot for good. Like it's not going to McGlade. Now, the ability for Warda and Russell to go cold at any point. I said they were a strong hitting team, power hitting team. But as for contact hitting, every once in a while, Warda and Russell, they would go cold. And we really saw that in the Cobra series, man. They couldn't really hit Barron's drop, and they really struggled to actually get runs across the plate in that series. Overall, as a collective, man, they really did have streaky hitting here and there. We did see it, man. Like, they had a bad day against the Cobras, and you know what? They just... if one of them is thriving, then they really all can't work together. When only Crouch was thriving, they really couldn't bring runs across the plate. But if they're all working together, if they're all on a really hot streak, then you know what? As a collective, they will really do much better. That's what I'm trying to say there. But you know what? The Preds, honestly, considering they missed the playoffs last year and we did not have expectations like Ryan Cratch is going to have an MVP season, I'm giving them an A- because you know what? They really gave the Cobras a run for their money in that ALCS and they almost got to the World Series. I think they actually would have put up a much better fight than the Cobras, sadly, but you know what? An A- I think is deserved for a really solid bounce back team for Warda and company. I'm not joking, you guys, that when I say, like, thank God we're on the very last team here because, like, I'm starting to run out of a voice. I've been recording now for about an hour, and this video is approaching 40 minutes in length. But anyways, the final team, the Western Wildcats, statistically, these guys dominated. Like, you look at their team, their lineup of Ryan, I was going to say Ryan Kelly. He's gone, man. Anyways, Kyle Schultz, Nick Saylor, Jackson Pearson, those three, they led the league in average RBIs and tied for home runs. They dominated that. As for the pitching side, you know what? Nick Saylor really did drive the pitching in the first little bit of the season. Second in ERA, first in walks and hits per innings pitched, and tied fifth in strikeouts. That's the only one that they were a little bit like average in. The rest, statistically, they did fantastic. Looking at their season entirely and like the schedule and stuff, you could see they were about 500 around the All-Star break. They were 4-5. They beat teams like the Diamondbacks, and they also lost to teams like the Cobras and the Preds. So like, you know what? They were a pretty average team at the time. Then they got 6 wins in the second half. They got 6 wins against the Magic and Gators, so it's not really that like big of a competition overall. So the record ended up being 10-5. They ended up being second in the AL, and they ended up losing in the ALDS though to the Preds. You know, they actually got dominated in those games, man. It kind of shows that they stat padded against those teams. Like these stats here, they were stat padding against teams like the Gators and the Magic. They did really well then. But against a real team this season like the Preds, they didn't really, they didn't really succeed. A huge reason for Wildcats' success in the wins in the first half came from Nick Saylor somehow keeping up what he did in regards to pitching. He emerged as an ace option in the first half. I don't know how that was possible. He took the ace drop from Kyle, man. Saylor was getting more starts than Kyle in those game threes. And Jackson Pearson, I've already mentioned it before, he had a most improved player campaign. The guy's hitting really improved. He started hitting more for contact. He was getting on base a lot more. And he was still hitting the home runs that, we saw last year. The siren shot still plays in my head a lot, man. Like, that was such an iconic home run. Meanwhile, the combined offense in the second half was just lethal. Kyle Schultz, Nick Saylor, and Jackson Pearson just went off as a collective. Hell, Ty Smith had a home run against Trevor Bonham. So that just says a lot about, how well the overall the offense was for the Wildcats in that second half. And you know what? Kyle Schultz got back on track in the second half as a pitcher. And you know what? He did get better. Let's keep in mind that in the second half, they were playing the Great Lakes Gators, the Metro Magic, pretty much the entire city of Trenton they were playing against, right? Looking at the cons, Kyle Schultz is pitching in the first half. On that note of Kyle's pitching in the second half, in the first half, I don't know what it was with Kyle, but he would blow games. He wasn't really getting wins. Kyle Schultz was struggling. Ty Smith, other than that one home run at the plate, he was pretty equal to Reese Harris in production. He did not do that well for the Wildcats. And you know what? He just struggled as a rookie, but that, you know what? That's okay. It's his first year in MLW. It's okay. What's not okay, in my opinion, is how the Wildcats kind of gassed us up a little bit. They had us thinking that they were a solid team heading into the playoffs. Even I questioned it a little bit that, you know what, they beat down really bad teams, but we've seen them dominate good teams before. So what can they do? They ended up getting slaughtered. Even Nick Saylor as the #1 option in that game too dominated. He lost 7-0. He got screwed over. They hit 4 straight home runs on him. It was just not a good day for the Wildcats, and they showed that, you know what, they stat padded against really crappy teams, and they really couldn't compete with big dogs like the Preds, COBRAS, MALLARDS this season. Like, they really couldn't. The Wildcats showed that in that series. And for that reason, you know what? You could say they had a 10-5 record this season, but that's also because of the teams that they ended up playing in that second half. Look at the teams in the first half. They were 4-5. They were up just under 500 because of the way the schedule works. We'll say they were 500. You know what? The Wildcats were an average team this season. I'm going to give them a B+, more of an average grade, because you know what? We're not blind. You can say you went 10-5 this season. You can say you guys had some of the best offense, but you were going up against pitchers like Jason Chadwick, Trevor Bonham, Chris Cheatham, and Brendan Jorgensen, who are far from serviceable aces. I'm sorry. They are far from serviceable aces in this MLW world. Like, maybe Chris Cheatham is, but the rest are all struggling. They are not the great pitchers that they once were. They are not living up to that hype. For that reason, the Wildcats, it's going to be a B-. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so on that note, that's it for this video. I've been talking now for 40 minutes, and my throat is dry as hell. Like, I need to go get some water or something now. I've been going on and on. I've done multiple takes for some of these because I've messed up a little bit, but you know what, it is what it is. I'm just happy that I finally got around to making a video for you guys, because a 40-minute video is what you deserve, and I wanted to put this out for a few weeks now, but, you know, exams got busy and stuff. You know, we're past that point. We're done with exams. Christmas break is here, so you know what, I'm gonna make a lot of content, so, you know, I can upload it a bit in advance. But anyways, guys, that's it for this video. I want to thank you guys all very much for watching this video. Leave your thoughts on, like, my rankings down below. Maybe put your grades. I want to hear what you guys think of some of these teams, some of my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. I will see you guys all next time. Peace out.